Hi, Archie. How are you?
Good.
What do you have on your shirt today?
Ninjas.
Ninjas. So we just finished reading those 3 rhymes that the Christmas night told them would help them on their quest. And here we can see the first one talks about an iron gate. The last one talks about a secret door. The first one has something called the Keepers of the Cauldron. And do you see how there's a capital K right there? And there's a capital C. So I think Keepers of the Cauldron is the name. It's actually the Keepers of the Cauldron. That's the name of, I was going to say a person, but it says keepers plural. This S at the end of keepers makes me think it is more than one person, a group of people, 2 people, I don't know. But cauldron reminds me of this page where they talked about the cauldron being filled with the water of memory and imagination, and they need to find that cauldron and get a cup of that water. So a keeper of the cauldron would be whoever is protecting it or keeping it or in charge of it. You know, you have to either ask that person or get past that person. That's the keepers of the cauldron. Then they're going to need these 4 gifts. And gift is an important word because gift is not something you can steal. It's not something you can give yourself. A gift is something that someone else gives to you. So they will need 1 gift from the Christmas night. We think we know what that is since he just dropped his red cloak on the floor. The cup and compass and key, those are things that someone is going to have to give to them as a gift. And then they will find the secret door, and that will be to their west. So that's what they know. The Christmas night has now given them his red cloak, and then he galloped out of the great hall. Galloped is when the horse runs very fast. All right, chapter 6. A white comet. Comet. Didn't we talk about the word comet when we were reading Geronimo Stilton Space Mice? When we were looking at meteors, didn't we also look at comets?
Yes.
We might want to look at another picture of that, maybe tomorrow. Once the night was gone, the candles and torches in the great hall grew dimmer. We learned this word dim near the beginning of the story when we were talking about how the light was dim. That means pretty dark. It means not very much light. It's not bright. A bitter chill crept over the room. This here, where it says the chill, crept over the room. Crept is like crawling, creeping, sneaking, moving slowly in kind of a secret way almost. That's creeping. But what is creeping? The subject of this sentence is a chill, a bitter chill. That's the feeling of coldness. So this is interesting because they're having a feeling of coldness crawling. Well, the idea of crawling or creeping is really something that a person would do. And they're treating that feeling of coldness like it's a person. And do you remember what we call it when that happens? If the author is going to have something that's not a person act like it's a person, that's an example of this long word, which begins with the word person. Personification is when we take something that's not a person and we treat it like it is a person, and that it's doing something like creeping that only a person should be able to do. I see your hands up. What's up, Archie?
May I go to the bathroom?
Of course. Let me show you here what I found out about a comet. It says, comets are balls of snow, ice, and dust that orbit the sun. So they go around the sun. Most of them spend all their time at the very edges of the solar system. They have long oval orbits that can take hundreds of years to complete. If a comet travels close to the sun, it warms up. The snow and ice turn to gas, which along with loosened dust erupt from the comet's surface and stream out to form two long tails. These comets can be seen as bright streaks in the night sky if they pass close to Earth. Halley's Comet is the most famous of all comets. It reappears every 76 years and can be seen next in the year 2061. I looked up some pictures of a comet that we can see here is one picture of a comet in the sky. Here is another picture of a comet in space. And here is another picture of a comet. It looks like in space over the Earth. Now, I do not know if that's what this chapter is about, calls it a white comet, but we will see. So in this sentence, the chill crept over the room. It just means that after the white night left, the room felt really cold. Everyone was reminded of how cold it is. But the way that the author uses this verb, crept, which is something that we think of a person doing, and yet it's just this feeling of coldness. This is an example of personification. It's when we give a subject of the sentence that's not a person, something to do that usually only a person would do. So then Jack says, "What do these three rhymes mean?" said Jack, looking at his notebook. "Who are the keepers of the cauldron? What secret door?" "I don't know," said Annie. "I just know we have to save Morgan." She gathered, that reminds me, right, of they had to save Morgan in this book too. Now they have to save Morgan again, but in a different way. Although it does involve a spell again, just like in this book, Morgan was under a spell. In this book, Christmas in Camelot, there's a spell on all of Camelot. She, Annie, gathered the red cloak up in her arms. "We've got our first gift. You're right," she said. "Let's go." "Wait." Jack always says wait. He always says, "Wait a minute, let's not rush. Let's think about this. Let's look in our book. Let's learn about this. Let's make a plan," right? He says, "Wait, we should figure this out first," said Jack. "No, we should just go," said Annie. She turned and headed for the archway. Jack pushed his glasses into place and looked back at the round table, at the frozen king and queen, at the frozen knights, and at Morgan Le Fay, who was also frozen. He loved Morgan. She was their great friend and teacher. If he and Annie did not go on their quest, Morgan's story and the stories of Camelot and all the stories about the magic treehouse would end forever. Forever is kind of a scary word because it means forever. Like there would never be another magic treehouse story ever. Jack took a deep breath. He put his notebook into his backpack. Then he turned toward the archway. Annie, Annie, he said. She was gone. Annie, wait, he shouted. Wait! Jack ran out of the great hall. Annie! I'm here, she said quietly. I'm waiting. She was standing at the end of the entrance hall, peering outside. Remember that word peering means to look. How do we get to the other world? She asked. Good question. Maybe the treehouse can take us there, said Jack. Come on. Together, Jack and Annie hurried through the inner courtyard of the castle and over the drawbridge. They ran over the frozen ground. Remember the frost on the ground when the grass was all frozen? To the moonlit grove of trees. That grove of trees was the orchard. The orchard. Clutching the red cloak, Annie started up the rope ladder. Jack followed. They climbed inside the treehouse and sat on the floor. Annie picked up the royal invitation. Close your eyes. I'll make the wish, she said. Jack closed his eyes. He was shivering from the cold. I wish we could go to the other world, said Annie. The bare branches of the trees rattled in the wind. I think it's working, whispered Annie. The wind stopped blowing. Jack opened his eyes. He and Annie looked out the window. The dark castle loomed against the sky. They were still in Camelot. It didn't work, said Jack, his teeth chattering. He's so cold. Yes, it did, whispered Annie. Look down. Standing below the treehouse was the biggest deer Jack had ever seen. The deer was staring up at them with amber eyes. His huge antlers seemed to glow in the cold moonlight. Most amazing of all, the deer was completely white as new fallen snow.
Wow.
Before we turn the page, let's take a quick look at this. We have as, adjective, as, and then new fallen snow. So what did we just find here? Do you remember what this is called? A simile. A simile. Have the as, and then an adjective, and then as, and then snow. So what are they talking about? They're talking about the color of the deer. So the color of the deer, that's the first thing. Okay, that's the color of the deer. And then the snow is the next thing. What do they have in common? The color white. How white? As white as new fallen snow, which means really white, very white. A white stag, said Jack. Puffs of frosty air blew from the stag's nostrils. He stepped toward the treehouse and shook his giant head. He's come to take us on our journey, said Annie. People don't ride deer, said Jack. But Annie had already started down the rope ladder. Annie, we know, doesn't like to think or plan or worry or study. She just likes to do it. So she is already on her way down the ladder. Jack watched from the window as she walked to the stag and spoke softly. The stag knelt. Very interesting. Annie climbed on his back. Come on, she called to Jack. Bring the cloak. Okay, said Jack. He gathered up the heavy velvet cloak. Clutching it against his chest, he climbed down the rope ladder. He hurried over to Annie and the white stag. Put on the cloak and climb on behind me, said Annie. Jack put the cloak on over his backpack. He pulled it around his shoulders and buttoned it at the neck. As the cloak fell down around his body, the soft, smooth cloth made him feel warm and safe. Safe is a really good word. When we feel safe, then we don't worry that we are going to get hurt or that bad things will happen. We feel safe. We feel like everything will be okay. Ready? Said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. He climbed on the stag's back behind Annie. The white stag slowly stood up. Annie leaned forward, putting her arms around its neck. Jack leaned forward too and held on to Annie. The red velvet cloak draped over both of them, falling past their feet. Here is a picture showing us how big, look at how big that deer is. This deer is called a stag. And there's Jack wearing the Christmas night's red cloak. And they're both on the back of the deer. That
Because
deer,
the deer is the Santa's deer. It can fly.
like a reindeer. This deer is so big, it needs to kneel down on the ground in order for them to be able to climb onto its back. The white stag stepped gracefully over the frozen grass. He walked through the outer gate of the castle. He blew out a puff of air, then broke into a leaping run. Jack held on tightly to Annie as the stag dashed across a frost-covered field. He jumped over hedgerows and stone walls. He bounded across icy streams. Annie's braids floated on the wind. The red cloak billowed behind them. Jack was amazed at how easy it was to ride on the stag's back. Sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Yes.
Calm and safe. I love that word, safe. As the stag sped like a white comet through the wintry countryside. So here we have our simile, like a white comet. We have learned that a simile can be when we have as, and then a word, a describing word, and then as. So we have two times we have the word as and as. And on both sides we have two nouns. So two nouns, and then as, blank, as, and then another noun. So there's 5 parts. A noun, as, an adjective, as, and another noun. And we're comparing those two nouns to see how are they similar. And they're similar by that word in the middle, that adjective, that describing word in the middle. But there's another way to make a simile, and it uses the word like. So here we have this, like a white comet. And this word like is what makes this a simile. So here we have like a white comet. And we saw a picture of a white comet back here. I would say this one here, be a white comet moving very fast. So now we can say that the white stag was moving fast like a comet. So it's like a blur, right? It just through the wintry countryside. The stag ran past flocks of sheep and herds of goats asleep in the meadows. He ran past thatched huts and quiet stables. The stag ran on and on through the starry night. Jack saw a cloud-covered mountain range in the distance. When they came close to the craggy mountains, Jack was sure the stag would stop. But he galloped on, not even breaking his stride as he started up a rocky slope. The stag finally came to a halt on the ledge of a steep cliff. In a windy swirl of fog and cloud, he knelt to the ground, and Jack and Annie slid off his back. The stag stood up. He stared down at them with his glowing amber eyes. Thank you, said Annie. Do you have to leave now? The stag lowered his head and raised it again. He blew out a frosty puff of air, then leaped away, vanishing into the mist. Vanishing means disappeared. So what do you think that the stag was saying when he lowered his head and then raised it again? Annie says, do you have to leave? And then the stag lowered his head and raised it again, blew out some puffy, cold, frosty air, and then vanished, leapt away, ran away, disappeared. So what do you think the stag was saying? Sounds like he was saying, yes, I have to leave. Bye, Annie said wistfully. Wistfully is a great word. It means that she's kind of like, oh, I wish he didn't have to go. She stared into the mist for a moment, then turned to Jack. What do we do now? I don't know, said Jack. Let's read the 3 rhymes again. He reached under the red cloak and pulled off his pack. He took out his notebook and started to read the first rhyme. Beyond the iron gate. Jack, interrupted Annie. Look. Jack looked up. The wind had blown away some of the fog. Beyond the cliff rose another mountain. A huge gate was built into its side. A pale light shone between the gate's thick iron bars. 2 knights in gold armor stood guard under flaming torches. Oh man, whispered Jack. That's it, the iron gate, said Annie. If we pass through that gate, we'll be in the other world. Dun, 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 dun. Chapter 7 is called A Good Trick. We're going to be stopping here in a minute, but let's just take a quick look. As the wind blew away more fog, Jack and Annie saw a bridge. It was made of thick wooden planks held together with iron bands. It stretched all the way from the edge of the cliff where they were standing to the iron gate. So they need to cross this bridge to get to the iron gate. Come on, let's go, said Annie. Wait, said Jack. What about the guards? The 2 guards in gold armor stood perfectly still. Their huge spears gleamed in the torchlight. I don't know, said Annie. Read the second rhyme. Here you can see where Jack and Annie are. Here's the iron gate, and here's the bridge. And here's one guard, and here's the other guard. And these are torches. So here we can see where they're trying to get to that iron gate. So Jack looked in his notebook and read aloud, 4 gifts you will need. The first from me, then a cup, a compass, and finally a key. The first gift is the Christmas knight's cloak, said Annie. Yeah, I guess it's supposed to help us somehow, said Jack. He unbuttoned the cloak from around his neck. Then he held it out to get a good look at it. Maybe it can make us invisible, said Annie. That's a great idea. This is the land of magic, right? That's nuts, said Jack. Seriously, she said. Cloaks sometimes do that in stories. Well, it didn't make me invisible, did it? Said Jack. Maybe you were wearing it wrong, said Annie. Give it to me. Oh, brother, said Jack. But he handed the cloak to Annie. It flapped in the wind as she pulled it around her shoulders. Can you see me? She said. Yes, Annie, said Jack, rolling his eyes. I can see you. We say rolling his eyes when he's like, oh, brother, that's a crazy idea. But it was, I thought, kind of a good idea. Well, we're going to have to see tomorrow how They managed to get across the bridge, past the guards, and into the iron gate. What color would you like your star to be today?
Blue.
And the outside also?
Yes.
Okay. Archie, it was good to see you today. We're at a pretty exciting point in the story, and I will say, so long.
Cheddar chip.
Bye, Archie.